right, guys, let's get this review for test 10 done. The first one is the reference angle for the given angle. Remember, reference angle must be positive, must be acute. And how far is it away from the x-axis? Well, 225 is wrong color. It's 45 degrees away from 180, so 45 degrees away. Negative 199 would be 19 degrees away from negative 180, so it's 19. And remember, if it's a radian measure, where it's one of our famous ones that we know, you just drop the top, power 3. Number 2, find the exact value of the trig function. So let's go reference angle first. I'm thinking cosine 30. Everybody knows cosine 30 is square root of 3 over 2. Then think about the quadrant. Go back to the 210. 210 is actually quadrant 3. Cosine is x. X is negative in quadrant 3, so it's negative square root of 3 over 2. Sine pi over 3, I'm really thinking about pi over 3. Everybody knows sine pi over 3 is also square root of 3 over 2. But then I got to go back to the 7 pi over 3 to figure out the quadrant. 3 goes into 7 2 times. That's 2 1/3. 2 1/3 pi is all the way around the circle and back in the first quadrant. Everything is positive in the first quadrant. There's that one. Secant 30. I don't think secant always do cosine. I'm just going to flip my answer to reciprocal my answer. The reference angle for 300 is 60. Everybody knows cosine 60 is a half. However, I got to flip that, so it's really 2. 300 degrees, it's in quadrant 4 because it's close to 360. X, which is cosine, that's positive in quadrant 4, so there we go. Cosine negative pi over 3, so I'm really just thinking cosine pi over 3, which is also, which is also 1/2. Negative 5 pi over 3, I got to go back and figure out what quadrant we're in right there. Negative 5 pi over 3 is almost negative 2 pi. So going the negative direction, you're almost back to 2 pi. Put you in quadrant 1, everything's positive in quadrant 1. There you have it. Number 3, write tangent in terms of cosine. So cosine's only, so tangent is really sine over cosine. And then you got to remember that identity we did. It's sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, which really means sine squared is really 1 minus cosine squared. So I'm going to replace the top of that fraction with, now that's sine squared, so I really need the square root of that. So I'm going to put plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine squared over cosine. And then your decision is you got to figure out, okay, what to do with the plus or minus sign. Because we're in quadrant 3 and I'm doing this in terms of cosine, cosine is negative in quadrant 3, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to take away the plus or minus sign and do the negative right there. And that's number 3. Number 4, write secant in terms of sine. Secant in terms of sine. Okay, so here's what I know. I know sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. That's the most famous one. I'm trying to get secant, but I'm going to do cosine. Like cosine squared is would be 1 minus sine squared. Okay, now secant is reciprocal. So let's do this first. That means cosine is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus sine squared. And before going any further, I'm in quadrant 1. Everything is positive, so that plus or minus sign is going to be positive. So if I do secant, I'm going to get 1 over that square root. I'm going to actually let you leave that square root in your denominator right there. So there's secant in terms of sine. Number 5, find the values of the trig functions of theta if secant is 5. Okay, if secant is 5, what I know for sure is cosine theta is 1/5. Also says sine is negative. That's going to help me out on the quadrant here. So to find sine, I'm going to go cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. So if I square 1/5, I get 1/25 plus sine squared is 1. All right, so if I move the 1/25 over, 1 minus 1/25 is 24/25. Take the square root, and I'll get plus or minus. Square 25 is 5. Square 24 is really 2/6. Now the plus or minus is already decided for me. It says sine is less than 0, so I'm going to go negative 2/6 over 5, which means my cosecant, if I flip that, I would get negative 5 over 2/6, which means I would take the square root of 6 to the top, take it out on the bottom. There's that. Tangent, don't forget tangent. Tangent is sine over cosine. So I would get, here's sine, there's cosine. The 5s would cancel, just leaves me with negative 2 on the square root of 6, which means my cotangent will be negative 1 over 2/6. Let's fix that one. You get negative square root of 6 over 12. That's a lot of stuff, but there's all number 5. All right. Let me erase that real quick so I can get number 6. Number 6, says find the area of a triangle with those two sides and that angle. Luckily, that angle is included between the two sides. You can do 1/2 times the two sides times sine of the angle. And we're just going to punch that straight in the calculator. When I do that, I'm getting 38.04. It doesn't give me a measure, so there we go. 7 and 8, solve the triangle. And you got to find everything. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find this. I'm going to do 90 minus 52 to give me that angle right here. That angle right there is 38 degrees. That's the first thing. I'm going to find this side right there. So I'm going to do, and again, you have so many ways you could go here. You just got to pick one that's correct and you're good. So I'm going to go tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to do 35 times tangent 52. Punch that in, I'm getting 44.8. So that side right there is 44.8. Then to find the hypotenuse, again, you got all kinds of ways. I'm going to do cosine 52 is adjacent, which is 35, over the hypotenuse. So remember how we worked that out? I'm doing division this time. 35 divided by cosine 52. And I'm getting 56.8, and those answers do make sense. Let's go to the next one. The next one is, the only difference is the radians. So to find my other angle, I'm going to do pi over 2 minus 3 pi over 8, because pi over 2 is 90. So these two angles do add up to be 90. So that's going to be 4 pi over 8, which is really what pi over 2 is. Minus 3 pi over 8, so that's just going to be pi over 8 right there. All right, so I know the hypotenuse. I need the two legs, so I'm going to start with cosine 3 pi over 8 equals adjacent, which I don't know. I'm trying to find this side, over hypotenuse. So I'm just going to do 425 times cosine of 3 pi over 8. Probably going to be punching my calculator buttons. And I'm getting 4. Give me 1 second here. Okay, you don't know. I'll say give me a second, but I actually paused because I'd forgotten to put my calculator in radians. So this side I got 162.6. I knew when I got my answer though with degrees, it just didn't make any sense. So I knew I messed that one up. Then I'm gonna do the sine to get the opposite side. So I'm gonna go sine of 3 pi over 2, and I'm gonna put the y down there maybe. So opposite over hypotenuse. Punching in 425 times sine of 3 pi over 8. I'm getting 392.6. Okay, so those answers do make sense because hypotenuse is the biggest side. The sides make sense, so I'm trying to say. You can't really check it, but you can make sure your answers do make sense. Number 9, bunch of exponents. This is where the review starts. All kinds of exponents here. I'm going to work inside out, meaning I'm going to leave this 2 outside for a minute. I'm going to do this -3 on top, which gives me r -3 s12. On the bottom, I do have r squared s squared. I'm going to move stuff around inside the bigger r. I'm going to move that r down there, which gives me r5 at the bottom. My bigger s is on the top. It's 12 and 2, which means it's 10 bigger. And then it's squared. If I square everything, that becomes a 20. That becomes a 10. And there you go. Number 10, determine if that function is 1-to-1. You can tell that by looking at the horizontal line test. Sorry about that, didn't mean to do that. I don't even have to use my calculator, which you can just punch that in and check your calculator, but this one's been raised up 3. It is a cubic function, which looks like that. It does pass the horizontal line test, which means is it 1-to-1? Yep, it is. Number 11, determine whether that's odd or even or neither. Now, one thing I know is it can't be even because there's no even exponents. So I'm going to check odd only. And the way you check odd, 2 ways you can check odd. One is you can plug in a negative y and a negative x. The other thing you can do is if it's odd, it's symmetric about the origin, which means the graph looks the same upside down as the right side up. So if you want to, technically you could punch that in your calculator and see what happens. So I'm looking at that after I punched in a negative x and a negative y, and it's exactly the opposite of what I started with, which means it is odd. All right, more review. Find the length of an arc. That was on our last test actually. This is the formula for radians. The radians is arc length over radius. The problem is that is the formula for radians. They gave me degrees. Okay, so first thing I do is change that degrees to radians, which means you just divide by 180, put pi with it. That's going to be pi over 4. So that's my theta. That's my angle. Theta is always the angle. So pi over 4. It says find the length of the arc. I don't know what the arc is. That's S. I do know the radius is 12 though. So when I get that, I'm going to cross multiply 12 pi, multiply that way is 4s. Divide both sides by 4. I get 3 pi. And you're good to stop right there. You need to put meters with it. If you want to, you can go ahead and punch that in and get a decimal. That's okay too. But that's all you got to do on that one. Don't make that too hard. 13, find the inverse. Remember, inverse, you take the x's and y's and switch. So I'm going to switch those. Again, cross multiply here. X times y, 2 times x. That's what we're going that way. If I go this way, 1 times anything is itself. The next two steps, you got to get the y's together. So I'm going to move the y over here. I'm going to move the 2x over there. Factor out the y. And then just divide. And when I divide, the y is going to be by itself. I'm going to change the y back to inverse of f of x. And there you go. All right, 14, old school here. Been a while since we did this one. Anytime the middle exponent is half the verse, we use u. Remember, u is always going to be the middle variable. Everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug in a u. It's always going to be u squared first because that exponent is twice as big as the middle. I just do that so I can factor it easily. I can do u minus 6, u plus 2. So I get u is 6 and u is negative 2. Don't stop there because nobody cares about u. Okay, so what is u? U is x cubed. So it means x cubed is 6 and also x cubed is negative 2. The way you solve those is you take the cube root of each side. So I'm going to get the cube root of 6 and the cube root of negative 2. And guys, that's it. I thought there were more, but that's all there is. So hope that helps. Come see me if you need to tomorrow. Once you do, great. I'll see you then.